This is what happens when you're printing magic money for generations.
Yeah.
When you have a budget and then like an off-books budget that's so huge and so corrupt that even the people at the top can't really be sure what's real and what's not anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that all of this wasteful spending taking place for so long ended up garnering support for the idea of someone coming in and just cutting things like crazy. And this is where I get frustrated with Democrats and the left in general, because they have lately engaged in this like weird strategy, if you can call it that, of just deny that it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And if you deny that it's happening, maybe voters won't see that it's happening. No, voters see that things are happening. And they see that you're trying to gaslight them and pretend like these very real issues are not occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates an opening for the right to come in and say, we'll save you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened with Doge.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened with immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well before the election took place. I did stories about how, look, there is a crisis at the border. I am not anti-immigration. I would like to reform our immigration policies. I would like a pathway to citizenship for the millions of people who have been here for decades, who have contributed to society, who have actually paid taxes, but aren't going to get, things like Social Security in return, even though they're paying into the system. I want a better immigration system. However, it was a lie that there wasn't a crisis at the border under Biden. There was. And since we weren't able to track everybody and make sure that we were doing background checks on people coming in, some pretty shady figures came into the country and were causing problems. The communities that were impacted by that deserved a voice, and they weren't getting that voice from the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was just gaslighting the hell out of them and trashing anyone on the left who had the audacity to raise these issues through their own platforms like me. And so either you take these issues seriously and have a seat at the table in finding solutions, or you're going to create a vacuum in which the right is going to take over. And guess what? They took over.
They did. And at the same time, though, I mean, politics is not going to go away.
Right.
There's endless fear-mongering about Donald Trump being not like the others. He's a dictator. This guy's qualitatively different from any president who has ever sat, even walked by the White House. And you look at FDR. I mean, this was a guy who was absolutely sort of flexing what we would call dictatorial muscles. No, I'm packing the court. No, I'm creating these agencies.
Yeah, that's true.
No, if I don't get congressional support, I'm going to do it anyway, because things got to a point where the foundations of the institutions were just sort of crumbling.
Yeah,
and
that's a great point.
What do you do?
Yeah.
And so even though that was all unfolding, politics still existed. All these kinds of different interest groups and pressure groups, and we do still live in a country where even if you have immense power at the very top, which let's face it, we haven't had in a president for some time. Even with that immense power, there's still this kind of big roiling political situation. And I think we're going to continue to experience that. What I'm starting to hear from the right is, kind of this flip of what we would expect on immigration, which is, Zelensky's a bad guy. He's been destroying his own country. It's not these Ukrainian refugees' fault. We can't just send them packing back to Ukraine to be destroyed by the same war machine that it was built, that we didn't want to be built in the first place.
Wow, the right is saying that?
Some people on the right, yeah.
That's excellent. I'm glad that they are.
And it's just, it's people's lived experience, which I know lived experience is sort of like a loaded word or whatever, but people are alive. They have experiences. And when the experiences of people on the right who are anti-Ukraine war from the beginning, anti-intervention. They see the refugees show up. These are people who are, not just going directly to the meth or directly to the gangs, lots of them came to my church. I have lived experience too, and it's reflective of that. It's not fitting into those neat sort of left-right binary categories that have been created for us paradoxically by the Uniparty.
That's such a great point. And for people who are really paying attention, and I mean, I'm not tribal, so I don't feel loyalty to anyone, or like politically speaking, any one political figure or political party. And so that gives me the space to kind of step back and constantly ask myself, okay, well, I've been voting Democrat my entire adult life. Am I happy with where the party is now? Do they represent me? Do I even know what they represent?
Right.
At
That's
this
the big
point?
question, yeah.
And It's tough, James, because right now I don't have a party that I feel represents me. You know, I'm very left economically speaking. Not so much though. Like, I'm not really in line with the mainstream Democratic Party these days when it comes to some social issues. They're just kind of unreasonable at this point, like on a lot of different things. And no, I don't believe in police and prison abolition. I think that's crazy. It's never been accomplished in any other country. We're like struggling to even get to the Scandinavian model when it comes to criminal justice. What are we talking about here in police abolition? Like, those people who had been preaching about those dumb policy ideas have squandered an opportunity to actually do successful, effective criminal justice reform. So I'm tired of the maximalists on the left. I think that they've destroyed the party when it comes to social issues. And then on economic issues, the Democratic Party has destroyed itself by essentially taking corporate money and siding with the corporate interests that fund their campaigns. So what's left for me there?
Is there like a point? Is there an event or a moment that is sort of living in your head where it was like it began to be so over when that happened? Was it Bernie's heart attack? Was it RFK getting kicked out of the party? Like, what was it? You know,
I remember this moment vividly in 2020 when Bernie dropped out of the race. And I was upset that he dropped out. I thought he still had a shot, but I think because of COVID and because of the fact that, you know, the mainstream corporate Democrats were rallying around Biden, he just kind of was able to read the tea leaves. And I remember talking to my good friend at the time, the late, great Michael Brooks, and he's like, things are going to get really bad. And I didn't realize how bad things were going to get. But yeah, things got really bad. But I think that was probably the moment when, for people like me, hope was lost with the Democratic Party. I mean, they fought Bernie Sanders. You think Democrats fight Donald Trump aggressively? Please. Yeah. I mean, you want to see an effective Democratic Party in basically destroying someone's political career? Look at how they responded to Bernie doing well, you know, in the primaries in 2020. Like, they'll do anything. I mean, they'll even drop out early on to rally around Biden to ensure that a typical, you know, moderate Democrat, corporate Democrat gets voted in.
I know he blamed it on the heart attack. Do you think there's something more nefarious going on there, that they forced him out in some way?
I just think Bernie, having experienced what happened in 2016, knew that his colleagues on the left side of the political aisle weren't going to let it happen.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, people will ask me, you know, would you ever run for office? It's a dirty game. It really is. And I get upset.
Come on, LA mayor, like the doors are wide open.
I don't know. I just think for those who were fortunate enough to get elected despite how gross our elections are, how could you not want to do right by your voters and actually do good things for them?
Yeah.
I don't get it. I really don't.
Yeah.
You know, don't you care about looking at the world around you, the community around you, the community that you decided to run in order to serve? Don't you want to see them thriving? And it just shocks me when you see someone like Karen Bass, for instance, in LA, engage in the policies that have failed over several years, continue to bolster those policies, support those policies, lie to the American people, lie to Angelenos about how she didn't cut the fire budget ahead of the disastrous wildfires we just experienced. We can see the documentation, homegirl. You cut the operational budget by $17 million. And a day before the fires, City Hall sent the Los Angeles Fire Department a memo indicating that they wanted to cut another $46 million from the budget, and they were looking to shutter 16 fire stations. I see how much money she's spending on these nonprofits who are not using the money to help the homeless. How are you going to justify the high taxes in our city and state, take all that money, funnel it to these NGOs, and tell us that you don't have money for the fire budget? I'm sick of it. I'm so sick of it. I can't take it anymore.
It's disturbing. And what's insane to me is like, the tech guys get scapegoated a lot as being the ones who are like, we're going to build this secret utopia and it's going to be off stage and we're just going to sort of like suck value out of you people and take it over to our little utopia. And one day we're going to get in our little UFOs and we're going to fly out there and you're never going to see, right? And it's like, you don't need to be a tech mogul in order for that to be your master plan, because we've seen it play out over the Biden years, where the people at the top of the establishment have done exactly that. The Karen Basses, the Gavin Newsoms, they've done exactly that without having to found any tech companies, right? And so there are folks who look at Karen Bass, just to stick with that example, and they're like, she's just evil, stupid and evil. There's no other explanation. You got to name it when you see it. Okay, but what's the motivation,
Yeah.
And it's like, you got the scales here. And on one side of the scale, you've got basic public welfare, the basic common good.
Right.
Do you walk down the streets of your city? How does it look? Are people thriving or are they struggling and dying and, going to a very dark place? And so that's on one end. And on the other end is something that's off stage that we don't get to see. How much money is it? How many offshore bank accounts is it? What is the payoff for so many of these policymakers and politicians that is causing them to go like, oh, well, I really don't want to impose destitution and misery on my own people, but the payoff is just too good. What is that?
Bribery is baked into our political system.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court has legalized political bribes. But it's even worse than that when you look at Congress and what motivates them. It's not just money in politics. It's the fact that they are free to engage in insider trading based on briefings that we're not privy to, the general public is not privy to, and they're able to make stock trades, individual stock trades based on those closed-door briefings.
Yeah.
They don't get prosecuted for it. There's barely any regulation or oversight of it. They have to, do financial disclosures of their investments, but they're kind of vague in terms of like the dollar amount, right? It's like a giant, it's based on monetary categories as opposed to like exact dollar amounts that they're, contributing to stocks. And even if they're not doing insider trading, if you are a member of Congress and you're free to trade individual stocks, well, you're literally invested in companies that you're going to be making regulatory decisions about.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
So that corruption's a huge issue. And it's created a system where all the incentives are for the politicians to be corrupt, right? To look out for themselves as opposed to their constituency, the people who voted them into these positions of power.
And those who are able to stand up and call foul on this stuff, you almost have to be like a freak and like an ostracized figure. I mean, I went to DC. I did a little mini doc on just this. Filthy Rich. Got Matt Gaetz, who at that point was still in Congress. And, hugely polarizing figure on the right and the left sometimes, depending on who you ask. But, we're walking up and down the halls of Congress and he's like, they came at me. I survived. I have nothing to lose. I'm taking you to every office of the prime offenders on, can't really call it insider trading. The rules are a little squishy, but you can look at the printouts, Unusual Whales and other guys have sort of tallied this stuff. And just went to their offices and, we did a little stand up in front of each of them and he called them out. And you have to be sort of a fringy person because the center is so corrupt.